Hey folks, it's Lucid. There is a new patch that just came out. It's Dominion's 6.16, and there's some really cool things in it. A bunch of bugs got fixed, but there's also some pretty major changes, especially with like mod commands that potentially make the game a lot different to play, potentially a lot better to play. One of them is this gym longevity command, which I'm pretty excited about. So, we'll be talking about that. I want to cover Dominion 6.15 before, though, because there's also some major stuff that's in there. I didn't do a video on it. I was kind of having stuff going on in my life. So, but I want to cover both of them. If you just want to see the 6.16, I'll have a timestamp so you can go ahead and click to it in the video. But yeah, we're going to start here with Dominion 6.15. This update introduces the Grand Communion. It's a new type of ritual communion that can be used to bolster the strength of global enchantments as well as dispelling of global enchantments. Grand Communions can only be used by priest mages of a few select nations, i.e. Pythium and There's also a lot of bug fixes and some other new features in this update, i.e. it's now possible to view unit details such as magic gems and afflictions by pressing tab in the battle unit overview, F1. Okay, there's a long list of changes. We're going to go through a lot of these here. So first we're going to talk about Grand Communions. Grand Communions, so first of all, thanks. There's a few people who also put up some videos on how Grand Communions work on YouTube, and then all the people who've been talking about it in Discord. So I've got some sense of how it works. Okay, so to do Grand Communions, you need the tag. Not all like mages have the tag, but if you have the tag, then any paths that you have, if you select this command, Grand Communion, will be contributed towards other Grand Communion mages that are casting globals or dispels in that province. It does not apply to normal rituals like summons or whatever. It does not apply to forging. You would think that it would work like communions. How do communions work? Communions work that if you take them, and I were to take these 4 guys and set them to be communion slaves, which is what this command does, you would think that, 2 guys adds 1 magic path, 4 guys adds 2 magic paths, 8 guys adds 3 magic paths. And then this guy, when he's casting spells, he's an Astral 4. You would think when he comes in, there's not an option to like click cast a Grand Communion spell. It's just cast ritual spell. You would think when I come into this, like, oh, a spell like Eyes of God, I normally can't cast because it's Astral 5. I would be able to cast it now because I've got the Grand Communion bonus. It would, the Eyes of God satisfies all the requirements. It's a global, so we should be able to cast it. Because we're getting a +2 magic bonus in Astral, which is something it specifies in this. Like it specifies it's going to add the paths of the mages. That's not how this works. You don't get bonus magic paths. What these guys effectively do when they are a Grand Communion slave is they are going to add to the strength of the ritual for purposes of like how many gems it's going to take to dispel, or how likely are you to actually dispel an enemy global, either by bumping into it or by casting the dispel ritual itself. So that's a lot different than a normal communion. I'm not sure if there's a better name, but it's a little confusing calling it a Grand Communion because you think it'd like use similar mechanics, but it's like totally different mechanics. So, yeah. So basically, the way it works is I can come in and I could like cast some ritual spell. Let me actually make an item here real quick so we can actually cast one, because we're actually going to need to be Astral 5 to cast it. So we're going to take all of these guys. Right now we've got it looks like 8 of them. We're going to have 8 guys become Grand Communion slaves. We're going to cast Eyes of God, and we're going to cast it with no extra stuff put in it. And we're just the bare minimum path requirement to cast it. We're Astral 5. So we're going to put up Eyes of Debug, or Eyes of God. And then with Marignon, we're going to come over here and we're going to do Arcane Analysis. And that's going to tell us how much is in Eyes of God. And so we cast Arcane Analysis, and it has a strength that equals about 9 pearls. I don't know how we got an extra one, but one of those guys might have had 2 paths, or maybe somebody else was set to be a communion dude. Maybe I miscounted. No, I don't know. There's an extra one somehow. There's some important notes about a Grand Communion. One is that it only works on units in the same province. So, like, if I had guys in a fort over here and they were being Grand Communicants, doesn't work. You have to be in the same province as the caster. So, now, is it worth it? I'll share a few thoughts. I think if you can move the mages in one turn to the site where you're going to be casting it, right? So, like, let's say we're casting it here and I had to move them from here to here. Probably worth it. You're getting like half a gem per mage turn. If it's a kind of crappy mage and they don't have anything terribly better to do, it could be worth it. If they're in the same province as the caster, it's probably worth it because you're basically getting 1 gem per mage turn. So that's probably worth it. If you have to move 2 provinces, I'm going to just say it's probably not worth it. You know, or like if you have to move 2 turns, right? So if it takes 2 turns of movement to get there, it's probably not worth it. So, yeah, I think this could be strong. You know, you could basically... There's a few ways I can think of where you could kind of abuse this, and I'll go through those real quickly. One is you can now cast this spell. Let me see if I can find it. Where's Dispel? There's Dispel, and then there's also... Disenchantment. And Disenchantment lowers, even if you fail, it's going to lower the overcast level of a spell. So you put 50 pearls in it. Now, it would normally be better to know how much is in it and cast the cheaper version, Dispel, which costs fewer gems, and you're going to get a bonus for the same level mage casting it, because you'll be overcasting it. Like, you'll be, if you're a level 5 mage casting, which what you would need to do Disenchantment, you'll overcast it by like a certain amount, or by more with Dispel, and that'll give you like an effective bonus gem thing. However, if you have like an enormous retinue, like 100 slaves, right, which is possible in a province, you could spam Disenchantment and take control of globals that way. This, I think, is actually the strongest use case that I can currently think of for using Grand Communions. It's kind of powerful, but it also kind of would suck to be in a game where people are doing that. It's not free, and it would take a fair number of turns, but, you know, you could have 200 mages, right? So you could have 200 mages, and then for 50 pearls... you would just be chipping away at whatever global you wanted to at like 200 per round. So it could be really powerful. I kind of don't even like sharing this with you guys just because I think it sucks. Like, this would suck for somebody to do in the game. But and it's also really strong, right? Like, yeah. So it can be a very strong mechanic. I think there's yeah. The idea of Grand Communions is very cool. I think in some ways, the way it's currently implemented is less fun and more abusive than a way that focused more on like making it more like a traditional communion. Like, if you got a bonus magic path, I guess it would be somewhat similar. If you got bonus magic paths based on the number of slaves you had, it'd be much easier to do things like Arcane Nexus, etc. But the thing is it doesn't keep scaling up that well. Like, as you add like 400 mages to it, you're getting like because it's a log scale for the power, and each additional level you get on your mage just gives you 5 additional gems. That's like the effective overcast bump. So, like, yeah, 2 mages give you 5 gems. Oh my god. 4 mages give you 10 extra gems effectively. This is how it could work in like some alternate universe. And that seems like a great value. But by the time you get to 8 mages, okay, well, you're only getting 15 gems. And then 16 mages, that's going to give you 20 gems. But then, and so now we're pretty close to the 1-to-1 gem parity, but you're also getting magic paths, which is, of course, very valuable. 32 mages, well, you're only getting 25 magic gems then. So now we're getting less. And then by the time you get up to 64, you're only getting 30. So that is less, it's harder for me to imagine being pissed off with this particular abuse, something like that, where like you're doing disenchantment spam with like a ton of communion slaves, because you wouldn't get nearly as big of a bump. You're only going to get like 30 or 40 extra gems, and that's not really going to make up for the difference between this and Dispel. So there's probably other weird things you can think of to do with Grand Communions. This, just sharing this with you, probably gets your brain thinking on some of them. It's an interesting mechanic. I'm not sure that it's going to be fun. Just dispelling people's globals all the time. I mean, I would want to kill somebody in my game if they had the ability to do that, because maybe at some point I'd want to reliably have a global up. But yeah, I don't know. It depends. I mean, I guess, as with all things. Anyway, we spent a lot of time talking about that. That's Grand Communions. Let's go back and talk about the next thing. So there's a few new items. There's the Quintessence chest. This is an artifact that gives you some temporary gems of all types. It's pretty cheap, but there's not a lot of mages that need gems of all types. There's also 2 new dragon scale mails. I'll show you those. I don't know if I have access to the chest here. I might. Yeah, so here's the chest. It's pretty cheap, 15 pearls, 10 earth, but you get 2 of all the gem types. So if you had a rainbow mage, like your pretender, they were going to put up a bunch of like magic. They were going to use a bunch of different, or cast a bunch of different spells in combat. This could be really good for that. Not a ton of uses outside of that I can't think of, but I don't know, it's fine. The scale mails, there's 2 new ones. So like this is the green dragon scale mail. Here's the red one. These are old, right? But they give like 6 hit points, 4 morale, 15 fire resistance. There's 2 new ones. There's an air one for a white dragon scale mail. This gives the same sort of stats, but shock resistance. And then there's this one, which gives the same sort of stats and acid resistance. And acid is a very rare gem type. I mean, a very rare damage type. But there had been, as far as I was aware, no way to get acid resistance. And this is the only way to get it that I know of. There's a few spells. It's normally fire water that causes acid. So there's like acid storm and things like that. So this does open up possibilities of maybe ways to cast acid storm and things like that. But that was, I don't know. I don't want to see too much more acid resistance in the game, I don't think. Because that was kind of the cool thing about acid, is there's no resistance to it. If it's just like another rock, paper, scissors damage type, I don't know. But anyway, it's okay. It's kind of cool. There's some items, but I mean, if there's a couple items that give acid resistance, that's probably fine. Battlefield-wide spells that give acid resistance, I'll probably start being like... But, yeah, so those are the items. Okay, the tabs to show the details in the unit battle overview. So that's in the F1 screen. If you hit... let's see. I actually haven't practiced on how to do this. Wait, how do I... Tab, hide show commanders, unit battle overview. Yeah, okay, I actually don't know how to use that. I was trying to figure that out before. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, there's a way in the F1 screen to show people who are blood sacrificing. There's a bunch of ways to filter in the F1 screen, to filter for like people researching, people foraging, things like that. This shows blood sacrificers. Graphs for other players are no longer set to 0 when somebody wins a throne victory. This is pretty nice. Small change, but it used to be like all the graphs would come crashing down when somebody wins. Made it really hard to read at the end of the game. Fix for too many global dispel messages. Fix for fluctuating HP on shape changers with blood magic. Blood magic can give you bonus hit points, and it was messing with this. Aurora Borealis can now be cast during darkness. So this is a spell that makes all the enemy units take a MR check or be stunned. It is changed now. So the problem was you could only cast it during Twilight. Well, if you cast Twilight, but then somebody casts Darkness, then this wouldn't work anymore, which kind of sucked. Now you can cast it during Darkness, but it's more effective in Twilight. The MR checks are easier. So that's a kind of cool thing. Spells are more careful to not berserk, or spellcasting AI is more careful to not berserk casters. Morale loss from Dark Skies is now printed in the stats screen when you click on morale. And that's really nice because it was kind of annoying that you had to like reverse interpret what the Dark Skies loss was. Dark Skies is a global that gives you a morale penalty based on how many enemy candles there are. Flying commanders stay behind troops could fail to attack and assassinations. Chopped off monster weapon afflictions was removed after battle, fixed. More monsters could get chopped off natural weapon can get chopped off natural weapons affliction. So this means you could like lose your tail, you could lose like a claw, etc. So that's cool. The affliction system is a pretty cool part of the game, so it's good to see it getting expanded better to monsters. Projection can no longer use blood slaves. This was one of the fun exploits that people had figured out how to use with Project Self. You couldn't bring gems with Project Self, but you could bring blood slaves on a scout. So you would have a scout in a province, you would project self onto that province, and then you could cast like big blood battlefield magic and mess things up. Or like send horror or call horror or something like that. So it was one of the spells that like seemed hard to use, but also weirdly seemed potentially powerful, but people just had to like, it took some time for people to think of all the ways to exploit it. And they've slowly been coming out. And as they've been coming out, Illwinter's been patching it. The thing that I wonder, though, is like, it's a weird spell that kind of sucks if you're not exploiting it at all. I don't know. Like, you can't raid with it. You can't cast battlefield magic to, like, you know, be present to, like normally if you had a big mage and you wanted to put them in a province to cast battlefield magic, you like would want them to have gems on them to cast it. So I think it's a super, like the base use case of just having like an expensive mage show up where you're not risking their life. Yeah. It's kind of it's a pretty weird use case. And I don't think it will ever get used. But then as people figure out, okay, well, maybe there's a way to get this guy to use gems or something or another, then maybe it's like potentially too strong. It's a weird spell. I don't know. So there's a mix. A lot of the things that are coming out for how to use Project Self have been getting patched out. And some of them probably should, but I hope there's still some interesting ways to use it. Because I think the vanilla way of just like sending this guy, I mean, this might work. Let's see this. I'll do Project Self. We'll attack some province. We'll see if this guy with every single path in the game, he's also probably going to get a bit of a bonus from blood magic and stuff. These magic paths will transfer, and the magic paths grant passive bonuses. So this guy might actually be able to, like, take a normal indie province. Let's see if we can script him to do this. We'll do Invulnerability, Soul Vortex, Phoenix Pyre. This guy might be able to do it. Phoenix Pyre, Mist Form, Drain Life spells. Can he do it? What do you think? Sadly, no. I mean, these were heavy cav. So this guy, he gets 1 hit point. Oh, he doesn't. It used to be you would get a bonus from blood magic. But it looks like they stopped that. They patched that at some point as well. I missed that. But that used to be one of the things that you could do with Project Self. Yeah, it's not... I don't want to say you can't do it. It's just not super clear how this spell's supposed to be used. Yeah. Anyway. Illusions can no longer... Oh, so he went off script here. Illusion... I think he was also an illusion. So this was actually getting rid of another Project Self thing. So illusions can no longer cast Phoenix Pyre. Illusions cannot alter their max HP. This was to get rid of the blood boost, or basically any way of altering their max HP. False damage can now cause HP rout. That's interesting. Hosting performance improvement. That's always good. Size 8 units will now become a large type mummy. So this is when you're doing Ritual of Rebirth, which is nice. So this actually is a really nice thing too. If the Arena Award is not an artifact, don't remove it from the world first. So this actually fixes one of the bugs in a mod I made. There's a mod called, I'll actually show it to you guys. I'll plug it real quick. So there's a mod called Balanced Arena, and I would highly recommend this now that this issue's been fixed. So basically, you get good items, but not artifacts, as rewards from the arena battles. And yeah, so the other arena mod is made by Aether Nomad, not Aether Nomad, by Red Rob. Yeah, so it's a better arena and yearly arena. But Better Arena will give you basically artifact tier rewards. The thing is, those can like totally change the game. I feel like that's too like flip-floppy. So anyway, we made Balanced Arena, which just... it's not going to give you 5 gem items. It's going to give you 10 gem items as a reward. The Arena awards have also been increased in Dominion's just vanilla. You get gold and fire gems now. So you actually do... It is worth thinking about, like, how do I win arena battles, right? Especially if you're a nation that can do that reasonably efficiently. Yeah, so it's really nice. Anyway, but the problem with this had been if you got like a Rune Smasher and there was only one Rune Smasher, I mean, there could be any number of Rune Smashers on the board, it would go find the first Rune Smasher on the board when it was searching. It would delete that and then effectively give that Rune Smasher to you as the arena winner. And that's just like a weird sort of RNG you shouldn't have to ever think about in a game. Like, oh, I put this temp gem item on this commander, this path booster, so he can cast an important spell in a game-deciding battle. And there's an arena, and by the luck of the draw, this one item was won by the arena, and by the luck of the draw, the item it chose to, or the unit it chose to steal from, was your commander in that battle. I mean, it's a pretty remote chance. But when it happens, and it has, it really pisses people off. So it was really nice that bug got fixed. But yeah, I think this is a great mod to use now. It was kind of... I'll put a link to this in the description as well. It kind of was... I wasn't really pushing it before just because that bug existed. But there's nothing I could really do about it. There was something I could do about it, but I didn't want to because it was going to take a ton of time. But anyway, Illwinners fixed it on their end, so that's great. Yeah, so let me go back to news. And here we go. Dominions. Okay. So that is this one. Very nice bug to have gotten fixed. Disabled items didn't show up on the F8 screen. Hidden in snow, etc., can now get more units. So that's nice. The Hidden in Snows, I think, were always a little bit underpowered. So it's nice that this one got a little buff. Communions used too many gems to reduce fatigue sometimes. So what would happen, this is actually a great improvement, is... this is what I think would happen. I can be wrong about it, but when a mage was looking at how many gems should they use to cast the spell, normally if you had like an air 6 mage and they were casting like a spell that cost 1 gem and 100 fatigue, but it was for like an air 3 spell, I don't know, something like Aerofend or something, right? They would look at it and they would be like, oh, because I'm an air 6 mage, we're actually going to cut the cost of the spell by a factor of 3. So it's really only like a 33 fatigue spell. And that's going to cost 1 gem. And if that's less than 50 fatigue, a lot of times it was like, hey, we don't need to spend any extra gems. But if it was only like an air 3 mage casting an air 3 spell that costs 1 gem, it would look at it and would be like, oh man, this is going to cost 100 fatigue because we're the same level as the spell requirement. And it'll keep adding gems to it, so it only costs 1 gem to cast, but we'll put 2 gems in it, and that will bring it down to 50 fatigue. And depending on the exact circumstances, magic or drain, it might even put another gem in it, like 3 air gems, to bring it down to 33 fatigue. Now, the problem was that if that air 3 mage was also in a communion, because it had some astropaths or something, and it was in a big communion, it was in a communion that brought it up all the way to being an air 7 mage. Well, the communion master, like the gem cost is only going to be, the fatigue cost for the master is going to be real small, because it's going to be, he's 4 levels higher than the air 3 spell. So that 4 levels is going to mean the spell fatigue cost, 100, gets divided by 4. So it's only 25. So it should never use extra gems because it's not costing that much. And then furthermore, that fatigue cost gets distributed to all the communion slaves. So definitely shouldn't use it. But unfortunately, the logic was that communion slaves wouldn't look at the boost they got from a communion when factoring in the fatigue to use gems. So now they do look at it. And so the communion bonuses, I think, are now added in. So it's going to affect how many gems get used in combat. This is a really nice improvement. It makes mages and communions a lot smarter. This is pretty important. Combat spells could not target row column 0. Fixed. It's a weird bug. No longer possible to demercify mercs by casting Twiceborn on them. So I regret to inform you, the days of permanently stealing mercs is over until somebody else figures another exploit. But Illwinter's really been cracking down on exploits, which is a little sad. It does make the game more approachable because newer players... The thing is, a newer player would never know about this. They would never know about that you could steal a merc permanently by casting Twiceborn with them. But they would also never know it happened in a game. They would just see a merc disappear and they'd be like, oh, I guess it died. Right? But meanwhile, some other player permanently got it. So, yeah, this can't happen anymore. There might be some way, like maybe if you Twiceborn them and then you kill them, then maybe they come back as a mummy that you actually permanently own. That would make sense too. Like I think that would be lore appropriate. The reason Twiceborn before saved them wasn't because they were like changing chassis. It was because it changed their home province, and mercs were designated to be mercs by what their home province was. So it was a kind of like a weird buggy thing that changed them before. But if Twiceborning and then dying and then coming back as a white mage, I would think you're not really a mercenary anymore. I think you're like a ghoul owned by that previous pretender. So there's a chance it still sort of works, but in a more intuitive way. MR bonus from experience was not shown in the detailed stats. So that's very nice. Yeah, you get MR now. There was a change in a previous patch where you now get MR at level 3, 4, and 5 for units, I believe. So that's super nice. And it changed. I think it was like you got 2 at level 4, but none at any other levels. Or I can't remember exactly what it was. Or no, that was hit points. I can't remember how they changed the MR. I probably have that wrong. But furniture and assassinations is now poison resistance. There's a ton of funny memes about people charming tables and then having a table commander. And apparently tables are pretty fucking tough. You don't want to fuck with a table. So I think they have like I don't know. In the memes people were posting, I haven't tried this myself, but they were like 900 hit points. It's pretty great. Okay, the map editor now asks for confirmation before exiting if there's any unsaved work. There's a few new events. Requires kelp, requires gorge, requires deep. These are useful for like triggering specific things, like event triggers. And then the same thing for requires different kinds of caves. Yeah, I don't know what that is. And then new variable can now use values of -2 to -4. Event variables can now use -4 to -2 as well. Max age now overrides any possible boosts from having regen. I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, so that's Dominions 6.15. Pretty significant changes in terms of, I would say the biggest ones are the Grand Communion, the items, Aurora Borealis, and most of the other things I think are like bug fixes. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, anyway, so that's kind of cool. Coming now to Dominions 6.16. So it's the new one. So shadow on map move cost text. So it was really hard to see map move cost a lot of times. You'd have to like really squint. And that had to do with like the... so, wait, what's the hotkey for it? They might have changed it. I thought it was M, but no. Show, 1 second. Yeah, it's Control M. Sorry. So, yeah, before it would just be this like 16 where you wouldn't... It would be really hard to see. In fact, I can't even see it here. Let me see. Oh, there it is, 7. Yeah, but depending on the the map background, it was really hard to see. Having this black shadow over a white text makes it a lot easier to read these sorts of things. So that's a really nice change. I've been squinting to look at like at map move stuff for a long time. So that's a very welcome change. Fixed the bug that resulted in the loss of magic barding. Removed duplicate Dracolich pretenders. That's quite nice. Galegate didn't produce hurricanes correctly. Oh, dear God. So it now makes hurricanes. I felt like this has been patched like 4 or 5 times, but presumably it actually worked this time. So now I guess it's going to spawn hurricanes for the person who isn't Galegating. Can no longer trick bid mercs to drown in a sea. I'm not sure what this was about. I guess it was a way to kill mercs by bidding on them in an ocean. I forget how that worked exactly, but you can close the mercenary screen by hitting B. B is the hotkey to bring it up, so you can hit B again to close it. Local multiplayer game crash if using a mounted pretender. We had to make sure people weren't using mounted pretenders on our new games for a hot minute. The Undying Bless and Shroud of the Battle Saint no longer result in the wrong HP value. This is amazing. The main reason here is you could actually kill certain commanders. You could actually kill a like a Veti Hag by putting a Shroud on her, and she would be negative HP at the end of the turn and die. So it's pretty funny. And that's just because she would have the same total hit points, but because she had Undying, I think that was it. I don't know. There was some weird... Was that... Yeah, I think that's what it was. But yeah, anyway, it displayed weirdly and you didn't get the hit points at the start, so it's... There's also weird things like Pretenders. You could have like a Demi-Lich with a bunch of Undying. I don't know. But the HP didn't really add up right a lot of times, and now it does. Repelling with a fatigue weapon now only deals fatigue damage. That's cool. Fix for false damage interacting with some abilities. Retreat. I'm not actually sure which these were. Retreating units with mindless mounts didn't work. Now it does. Immortal and Twiceborn effects work on mercs as well. Fix for 3D clipping glitch. AI improved global enchantment usage. That's nice. I'm not actually sure what this one does, but The AI would have ways that it determined how many gems to put in a spell before, based on like how many had been put in ahead of time. But yeah, this is pretty vague. I'm not really sure what this does. Sunken lands can now receive underwater settlers a few months later. That's interesting. Yearning Chance was not saved when saving game settings. So there's, for those of you who don't know, by the way, when you're starting a new game, so if I go to like create world and I do the things and I, make a game name and all the stuff, when it's time to actually do like the game settings, you can actually do, if you hit question mark, you can see you do Control L to load previous settings, and you can do Control S. So I can do Control L, and that's going to load all the game settings I had before. So if you're doing single player games a lot, it's really nice to kind of get it set up how you want to, and then it's going to remember your default settings. And then it saves like a minute every time you do a new game. It's totally worth it to do. But it had forgot, which one was it? Oh yeah, the Yearning Chance. So the Yearning Chance is 50. Anyway, this one wasn't getting saved. I don't think I ever worried about that. Fix for line deployment failing. Spell AI is better at evaluating life drain spells. Presumably this means that it's going to cast them more often when they're high fatigue. Or it's just going to factor in the bonus fatigue reduction it gets as well, instead of just looking at damage. The only thing I can think of is it would be casting these spells more often, which is really nice because most of the time players are really happy when life drain spells get cast. Protective Force, so this is things like Flying Shield or Ice Shield. These things only get applied now before armor. And this is a nerf, because if it got applied after armor, what that also means is it got applied after things like damage reduction. So if you had Temper Flesh up, that damage would be cut in half, and and then the halved damage would go against Protective Force. So it was making Protective Force effectively a lot stronger. Applying before armor, I can't really think of any ways this would be better. I think this is just worse, but maybe there's something I'm missing where it's actually a slight buff in certain cases. I think it's pretty much always a nerf to Protective Force. In some ways, this is okay because like buff stacking is kind of weird and sometimes kind of bad. I think for game balance, but I don't know. Protective Force was definitely not something that I've ever heard called oppressive. There's a lot of ways around Protective Force. It is just protection. So things like armor negating weapons and stuff like that all automatically go through it the same way it goes through normal armor. And yeah, armor piercing also reduces it. Okay. Fix for ritual not creating a fully intact fort. But by the way, I do think this makes sense. Like if this is adding to the protective value, it would make sense that it adds to the protective value of your armor. Like before, like it doesn't make sense to be this weird secondary check after you've been hit. So I think this logically is a better place when you're thinking about like combat mechanics for Protective Force to apply. Just balance wise, I'm not exactly sure why it's needed. Fix for ritual not creating fully intact fort. This actually is a really major change. Because it normally would be like if I magic phase, I'll show you here. Let's see. Don't know if that's actually the game I want to. Yeah, okay, we'll do this one. So if let me come over here. Wait, do I not? Okay, I have a debug sensei. So 1 second. Okay, so I've taken this province. I'm going to cast a wizard tower there. So there's going to be a magic phase fort here. And then I'm going to come over with Tian Chi. And we're going to take this army here. And we're going to take this fort. And in the old system, we would have popped this fort. because the fort would have spawned, and because there was an army on it, it never would have initially filled up the wall integrity. So this would have be popped, and I would be ready to siege it. And because of that, you would always want to be really careful to be like patrolling any forts you magic phased. Yeah. You didn't want this to happen. Now, if we go to Marignon's side, they're like, huh, nice. Don't give up this province, because this fort has a bajillion wall integrity. I'm of mixed minds about this, and I'll share my thoughts here. So, the first thing is that I think this makes sense. Why would you summon a magical fort and then have the walls in the fort already pre-broken down? Like, no, you're summoning like a perfect new fort. The army has to take time to break the walls down. This is how it should be. It makes sense. The problem that I have is that balance-wise, there have been so many things this from Dominions 5 to Dominion 6 that have made it easier to defend forts. And this is a major one. This is a new big one. I'll go through and list it again, right? The things that make it easier to defend forts are that the fort wall strength now is significantly higher. And that makes sense because armies are bigger because there's more money, and relative to mages, units are cheaper. The siege defense on forts is also bigger now. This is how much siege reduction it negates every round. This is also bigger. So the fact that both of these are bigger makes it take a lot longer to siege forts. So like if you had a 100-person army, or like a 200-person army, you're only going to be doing 120 a turn. Furthermore, there's a lot more strategic nukes. Like there's a lot more like astral nukes. Like, so you can do Thunderstorm. This is like flames from the sky for fire. You can do, flames from the sky. You can do Stellar Strike, where you're dropping meteors on them. There's a bunch more remotes you can drop on top of armies. I think there's a poison one now too. So there's a bunch of these remotes you can drop on top of armies, and you're going to need bigger and bigger armies to take forts because they have a lot of wall integrity and more siege defense. Furthermore, if they have a storm staff inside the fort, and they have cast immaculate walls, you literally have to get through the gate. And you can't even race your way through the gate because forts start with spawned gate blockers, and you're just not going to get through the gate before that. So in a multiplayer game, you're going to have superior evocation or like clearing ability to be able to clear out the gate and then bust through there in the late game. It just seems extremely taxing, and it's not a fun part of the game exactly. In my opinion, the main thing they could do to fix this is to allow, over time, if you're willing to, you can make more holes in the fort wall. If this one if this one has 2,000 wall strength, then I think if you over siege it, so if this goes negative by 1,000, so like half of the wall integrity, you make a second fissure in the wall. And if it goes negative by 2,000, so 100% of the wall integrity, you get a third hole in the wall. And maybe that could keep going all the way up to like, negative 200%, where you've tapped it out, but you've now got 5 total holes in the wall. Something like that, I think, could maybe fix this, but I don't know. Games are still going to play, right? Like, it's not, I don't think it's ruining the game or anything. You can still play games and people will adjust to the meta, and people will come up with good strategies, and there's ways to counter it. And this is going to make, in some ways, it's shuffling up the meta. It's making you rethink how you structure armies and think about playing the game. But I think it's like pushing towards a more stagnant play, especially in the late game. That's my feeling. I haven't played a lot of multiplayer in Dominion 6 yet, but yeah, that's my worry. But anyway, so this is a pretty major change. It's going to shift up the late game a lot. Magic Phase forts are a lot better now. So that's probably actually the biggest change in this patch. Yeah, so Grand Communion ability is added to more heroes. There's new random events. There's event typo and stat fixes, and then there's modded barding supported. So you can now make new barding for mounts. You can now, mod makers can now display variables in their event messages, which is super nice. And blessing cold scales didn't work. This is, I think, the second or maybe first most important part. This is the other really important part of this patch. Gym longevity. So this probably should be a game setting. I know this was mentioned in the beta. But this actually is one of the ideas that's kind of come from our community, I think. So we've been talking about gym baiting a lot. And if you've been watching the finals, gym baiting can be pretty oppressive. If you're getting coalition, you could potentially get attacked in the magic phase by every player. Before, you could get attacked in the raid phase by every player. Now raid is basically a normal attack. And you can also be attacked by independents, by like horrors or ghost riders. I think that doesn't stack for multiple players. Those get added together into a single attack. But point is, you can have a lot of gym baiting. And it's kind of not fun. So now there's basically game settings, which have been implemented as a mod command. So we'll just need to make up a couple mods for this in the meantime. I mean, I could maybe do it, but I mean, it's probably in the workshop right now. Let's actually see if it's made it into the workshop. Let's see. Yeah, so the Grand Wombat, many thanks, sir. Yeah, he's already gone and made the mod. So this is probably like a 2-line mod. And there's two basic ways that this has been implemented. One way is where, like, let's say you have 10 fire gems on a mage and he's scripted to make as many fire elementals as he can. This will allow those fire gems to persist for an entire phase. So if you get gem baited by a magic phase attack by multiple players, then those 10 fire gems, he might deplete them in the first combat. He'll summon fire elementals and there's no fire gems left. But in the second magic phase attack, where that guy is going to get exposed, he's going to still have those 10 fire gems and he'll summon those 10 fire elementals all over. So that's this mod where you're getting the gems basically for the whole phase, no matter what you do with them. The other one, per month, this is where if you're getting any gems you spend for the whole turn, so, you know, I could get all my gems burned in the magic phase, but I'll still have them present also for the normal phase. So this basically, if you have this turned on, you basically can't get gem burned where it will interrupt your orders. So, you know, if somebody does a gem burn magic phase attack to interrupt the spells you would cast in normal phase battle, that won't work. It will gem burn you. It will cause the gems to get used, but those gems will persist basically as temporary gems for the rest of that turn. So you can still cast whatever it is you need to cast. However, gem burning still sort of works in that if, let's say you have 20 mages that are each scripted to summon a ton of elementals, and somebody does a gem burn attack on you, but they don't have a major fight, they will have made you waste gems. Because those gems get spent, and sure, they're available for the rest of combat as like a temporary gem effectively. But when the new turn comes around, those gems are now gone, and you'd have to replenish them. So gem burning is still... And that, by the way, that's a very important balance part of the game. If that didn't happen, there are certain strategies that would become like pretty oppressive, like just summoning elementals all the time, or like huge master and slave traps. Like a lot of the things which are really, really, really strong in combat, they're really expensive. So you have to be careful how you deploy them. And I think that's part of the balance of the game, or at least part of the balance of the current meta. So This is great. I'm not sure which of these. I think this is like pretty light. This is, if you, I would say this is a strict improvement on vanilla, right? Like, there's nothing fun about getting coalitioned and having 4 people gym burn you as part of like fighting. It's just is oppressive and it sucks. So this is just, I would say, strictly better than vanilla. I don't think there's any reason to play in the current setting. I think this is pretty much always better. This changes the game a bit in that, like, this one is really about like abusing, like abusive coalitions doing coordinated gym burns on you to like get rid of all of your gyms. This actually makes it where like gym burning at all, even in like a 1v1, doesn't really work very well. So I think, I mean, I'm so used to gym burning. To me, it's just like one of the tactics I deploy. So I might not want to play with this. I might want to play with this one. But yeah, anyway, it's your choice what you get to do. I think both would be fun. Yeah, I'd be happy to play games on either of them. I think my preference might be for this, which would still allow some gym burning. But I'm an old curmudgeon, so it could be I'm game for like kind of a, I'm more happy to play with like abusive mechanics than other players. But anyway, so that's that part, and I'm really glad it got added to the game. Gym longevity, really, really cool. I think this is a great reason for a lot of people to just start up a new multiplayer game. So Cave Nation 3 to start under a cave entrance. I think this is a tag you can give them. And then new event commands: requires min global, requires max globals, and then dispel globals. I don't actually know how this works, but I guess you can have certain events that will trigger based on how many globals you have. But that's it. I think those were the big patches that I missed. I'll try to do better about patch notes. It was something I was pretty on the ball about, and I've kind of forgotten or, run out of time lately. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Hope you've learned something. And yeah, hope you're fired up to play another Dominions multiplayer game. Until then, take care.